Message of friendship is what the twin launch implies. Iran made a maiden launch as it sent off its first non-experimental satellite into space mid-January. That satellite, called Payam or Message, is to be followed by another called Dusti or Friendship. But not everyone welcomed the message as one of friendship. Iran is enjoying a promotion in science as it has ranked 11th since 2017. That's 3 steps up from 14th in 2016. Stay with me, Leila Faramarzi, on Iran Today for more. In the region, Iran does rank first in the aerospace sector, but it still has many a rung on the ladder to climb before it can launch its satellites in full confidence, or near full confidence. The said Payam Amir Kabir or Message of Amir Kabir satellite stirred up massive excitement as it took off to pierce the Earth's atmosphere, but it failed to reach the necessary speed to achieve orbit. The first explanation that comes to mind would be that the SLV or satellite launch vehicle failed the satellite, the SLV having been the Simorgh rocket. An SLV company director, Eskandari, will explain what happened to make a successful launch go down just before the mission was completed. Iran is applying caution in scheduling the next satellites for launch, which are, to be exact, Dusti Sharif or Noble Friendship and Nahid or Venus.
It's a very complicated and difficult task to bring an object to the height and speed of the desired orbit in the space, because that's how you can keep a payload there, otherwise it will be destroyed. Launch failures are not unusual and they happen all the time in the world. Over 60 years have passed since the first passenger transportation by airplanes, but still we hear news about airplane crashes here and there. This holds true about train crashes too.
Iran did officially explain earlier that the first and second stages of the space mission were completed successfully, but in the third stage, the Simorgh or Phoenix failed to accelerate the Payam satellite to orbital speed. The third stage consists of a newly designed Iranian-produced solid fuel motor weighing less than a ton. Apparently, this new motor either failed to separate from the second stage and ignite, or it malfunctioned during operation. I spoke to the Deputy Iran Space Research Facility Director. Javad Mousavi sounded no less proud and confident in Iran's space program than if the satellite had reached orbit. He showed me around the exhibition hall with complete patience and enthusiasm.
All
the countries which have entered the satellite industry have put time and effort into it for around 20 years before they can have a successful launch that ends up in the desired orbit at the right speed and altitude. Countries like Russia and the US have made huge investments to get to where they are right now. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of success. We learn the path to success from these failures. This path, however, is a little bumpy for a country like Iran, which is faced with the harshest sanctions and limitations. Moreover, satellite management in the orbit also requires a lot of experience. World countries never give this experience to Iran.
It is not unusual, however, for the most impressive space program not to get to show off its intended satellite gazing down to capture images of Earth. As for Iran's Payam, it was bound for a 500-kilometer altitude and a 55-degree latitudinal angle. It was to fulfill a lifespan of 2 years and dispatch 40-meter resolution images. Its mission was to capture images with 3-hue imagery, that's in green, red, and infrared, and also to store and send messages and measure space radiation.
Iran's Ministry of Information and Communications Technology has plans to develop 2 classes of satellites. The first group is telecommunication satellites, which enjoy a more complicated technology and are placed in the geosynchronous orbit, which is 36,000 kilometers away. These satellites are used for broadcasting, banking communications, and the sort. The second group is remote sensing satellites. They are used for observation of farming lands, water management, environmental protection, forest maintenance, desertification, and other services of this type.
Iran's space program is more than a process, as it has had successes already. While its first major non-experimental launch didn't get to settle in her new home, the country has had successful experimental launches in past. Iranian satellites are manufactured thanks to Iranian university labs and scientific capability.
In order to achieve the knowledge of building operational satellites, first we need to be able to place satellites with lower weights at lower orbits. Omid, Navid, and Rasad satellites are examples of this type, whose weights range from 15 to 50 kilograms. The lifespan of these satellites is 2 to 3 weeks. It was a good opportunity to test our capability of building satellites.
Never judge a book by its cover. For what looks like a water heater might turn out to be a satellite launcher. But why does Iran need satellites and their launch vehicles? And why has it designed its satellites in their present form? Well, because it wants them tailored to its needs, which are namely monitoring the Earth's vegetation and aiding in cultivating a certain crop, monitoring electricity networks and water bodies accounting for underground waters and minerals, monitoring solar radiation as renewable energy, monitoring the 3 elements for pollution, monitoring forests to prevent or control fires, and a favorite with me is fulfilling telecommunications requirements, such as securing our satellite TV channels. This way our streaming can't be officially discontinued. But why has the country been so adamantly motivated to do so?
Independence is our need. I tell you why. Because many times we need to have immediate access to the data transmitted from remote sensing satellites, for example, in critical moments. But unfortunately, such data is not available because those satellites have been placed in the orbit for other uses. As a result, we need to have our own satellites that address our special needs in times of crisis and at any time we want. In times of flood or wildfires, that the extent of the damage grows very fast, the importance of instantaneous satellite data proves itself.
Our country has a special condition that requires it to strive to change the sanctions and limitations into opportunities. In terms of space technology, we have the same issue. Of course, it is not economically wise to make this large-scale investment in the space industry and build everything from scratch. But because of the sanctions, we had no other options. However, this time too, the imposed sanctions not only could not obstruct our scientific growth, but also helped us get access to space technology even faster.
Aerospace technology is important not just in its own right, but in influencing other fields.
Basically, there are some technologies which are on top, meaning that other technologies benefit from them. Aerospace technology produces positive beneficial effect on other fields of technology. For instance, in the past, cars used to be in the shape of a rectangular cube, but today, thanks to the advancements in the field of aerospace, every car enjoys some level of aerodynamics. The knowledge of aerodynamics has helped the auto manufacturers to make cars with lower drag force, hence less fuel consumption. Or the fast food, which is widespread throughout the world today, was first innovated for astronauts. Or even the polymer materials, which are today being used in cars or other things, were first used for space structures because polymer has low weight and high strength and is cheap.
Then there's the issue of satellite launchers. Countries that can make such advanced equipment are only those with the right infrastructure, whereas satellite technology has become commercial and more than 11 countries can manufacture satellites themselves, including Saudi Arabia.
When it comes to the launchers, not many countries possess that technology, but Iran is among the few which have managed to build it. We entered into negotiations with many foreign countries. However, none of them accepted to launch our satellites. For example, we negotiated with the Russians to launch our Sina satellites, but they simply broke their promise. We had the same experience with Italy for our Mespa satellite. Finally, in 2007, we came to the conclusion that we need to equip ourselves to the technology of launchers.
What exactly does your company do? How involved has it been in national projects?
شرکتی که ما الان در واقع تأسیس کردیم شرکت خدمات پرتاب.
Our company is a launch service provider company, like a travel agency which builds a connection between airplane and passengers, and this way gives services to the passengers so that they can have a smooth flight. Our company gives orbit and suborbit services to knowledge-based companies which are active in the field of satellites. These services help you have an assured launch at lower cost. It gives assurance to the companies that their payloads will be dispatched with a lower risk.
Time for a short break. We'll be back in no time. As satellite technology influences other fields, it draws on specialists from other fields to better itself. From all scientific fields, basically, and even some humanities branches.
This achievement is the result of extensive efforts and studies which include every single subsystem of a satellite, that is onboard computers, cameras, different optical spectra, telecontrol, heat control systems, satellite sustainability systems, and many other things. Our achievement in the field of satellite indicates that we have made progress in all of these areas.
Since I earlier used the words missile and satellite in the same breath, let me clarify why launching satellites is not one and the same as launching missiles, or rather missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads. Because the confusion has led to a lot of allegations against Iran. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu called the satellite the first stage of an intercontinental missile, and US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo followed in a tweet that in defiance of the international community and UNSCR 2231, Iran's regime fired off a space launch vehicle today. UN Security Council resolution aimed at limiting Iran's nuclear program, that is. Iran's launch was no intercontinental ballistic missile ICBM launch, and it was certainly no violation of United Nations Security Council resolution 2231, to answer to the tweet. The US appears threatened by any missile that can exit the atmosphere. But actually, US worries sound more like a ruse to stop Iran's technological advancement, calling the Islamic Republic the world's foremost state sponsor of terror. It's astounding how the US contradicts itself, given it confesses eloquently how it created Daesh, etc., etc., the very Daesh that Iran was instrumental in defeating. Anyhow, the satellite dream is not a sudden birthday wish and whim of the Islamic Republic in its 40th year. In fact, Iran took an interest in space research as early as 1967, well before the 1979 revolution, and the country is one of the 24 founding members of the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, which was set up in 1958.
The feasibility studies began in 2000 in several universities and scientific institutions. We started building our experimental satellites, and finally in 2009 we launched our first indigenous satellite, which was domestically designed and built. All of its 4 stages, that is building satellite, launcher, ground control station, and ground station receiver. Iranian scientists managed to build the required infrastructure and subsystems for building operational satellites.
It was by 2000, however, that the country actively embarked on research and development to create SLVs. Eventually came Iran's first attempt at orbiting a small satellite in 2008 with the 2-stage Safir SLV. The launch succeeded on its 3rd attempt a year later, and in 2009 Iran was officially an orbital launch-capable nation. In 2010, Iran unveiled a mock-up of the Simorgh, and Iran's space story has been unfolding since.
اساساً از اینکه کشورهای
Basically, developed countries do not welcome the progress of developing countries, and the reason is that they want these countries to remain needy of their help forever. That's exactly why they support human capital flight from these developing countries to their own countries. Moreover, a country's progress in the field of science leads to the economic, military, and defense potential of that country.
With satellite space technology becoming commercial and economical, the world will be seeing a revolution in transporting people and cargo. Eskandari envisages the day when an 18-hour trip from Dubai to New York will be reduced to just an hour. China's One Belt, One Road remake of the Silk Route has also dotted in a space route, which made me ask if Iran would find itself on that route.
موضوع پایگاه چابهار از برنامه‌هایی بوده که یکی از پایگاه‌های فضایی ایران
Iran has future plans to exploit the untapped potentials of Chabahar spaceport. It can be used as an international spaceport for launching satellites if developed. If the government makes investment and takes necessary actions to develop this spaceport, I'm sure we will have attractive offers from the Chinese with regard to their plan of One Belt, One Road remake of the Silk Route, and even for the Russians, who face launching problems due to their geographical position.
The possibility of an SLV operation leading to missile development is so remote that it pales in contrasting the two. Major criteria such as re-entry technologies, operational requirements and launch crew training cannot be adequately addressed while operating SLVs such as the Simorgh. And do note, Qiyam, Sejil and the Qadr missiles are equipped with a triconic nose cone that is too small to house Iran's allegedly prospective nuclear implosion device. Here are the differences as termed and detailed by a specialist. Ballistic missile carry payloads must survive the rigors of re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere, requiring development of robust thermal and mechanical protection systems. SLVs or satellite launch vehicles, including the Simorgh, carry payloads that operate in space and that are not subjected to challenging re-entry dynamics. We'll get more into the detail of the difference after a quick news review. So what do other media outlets have to say? Beginning with Popular Mechanics, Iranian satellite launch seen by some as cover for missile research fails. Iran claims to be developing its own spaceflight industry because no one else will sell satellites and rockets to the country, a claim that is pretty much true. Iran's orbiters have so far been mostly remote sensing and imaging satellites, although it also claims to have sent 2 monkeys into orbit. There are no international agreements that prohibit the country from developing its own space rockets. However, senior Trump administration officials, including Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, believe Iran is using the space launchers to further its ballistic missile program, which could lead to missiles capable of striking the United States. However, while space rockets and ICBMs have a lot in common, the New York Times recently reported that the Pentagon and the U.S. intelligence community did not believe that was the case. Iran has been conducting space launches since 2005, and yet there has been little practical movement toward long-range missiles in that time frame. Next is Tehran Times. Startups can develop aerospace industry tech in Iran, says the Vice President Surena Sattari. The active presence of startups and knowledge-based companies create added value and jobs for the private sector. Iran's achievement in the aerospace industry would be developed by an appropriate entrepreneurship ecosystem. Startups can introduce different aspects of the space industry to ordinary people. Next is the national interest. Iran's space odyssey raises red flags for the nuclear community. The available evidences do not prove the claims that Iran has ICBM. These capabilities require years of testing. If Tehran decides to develop ICBM, the international community will have enough time to address this challenge. Rather, the available evidences indicate that the missile program is conventional and seeks to deter regional powers and American forces in the Middle East. Next is the Mehr News Agency. Iran does not await any country's permission to develop peaceful space industry. This was said by Iranian Minister of Communications and Information Technology, Mohammad Javad Azari Jahromi. He went as far as saying, if anyone claims that Iran should not develop its space program, we tell them you're talking nonsense. Iran's maximum ballistic missile range is 2,000 kilometers. Cap that range and Iran might agree not to route for a firing range of 10,000 kilometers, which would be enough to reach the US, according to a Western expert. Even that effort would be unnecessary, however, as Iran feels no need for over 2,000 kilometers firing capability. Now, presuming Iran's space program can take on a different form and ambition, that is, turn into a more advanced ballistic missile program than Iran already has, it could be curbed. How? By doing just that, curbing the space program rather than trying to scrap it altogether. Anyhow, Iran will not sit back to fall irrecoverably behind the fast-advancing world. If the countries of the world won't depart knowledge for fear of US threats, Iran will settle for less in creating the wheel from scratch. For example, Iran made a deal with a foreign company to receive help in resolution filming from 1,000 meters. But the wait was so long that Iran gave up on its foreign partner and eventually managed 400-meter accuracy on its own devices, launching the respective satellite into space by the name Navid or Promise. Iran is at present working on a below 50-meter capability. Even the telecommunications minister Azari Jahromi got round to tweeting, a satellite with the resolution of 1,000 meters was due to be built through international cooperation 10 years ago, but they didn't cooperate with Iran.
In essence, aerospace industry is very costly and usually governments step up to develop it. As a result, at the beginning, governments pay the costs for the general design, testing, making models and other stages until the technology of building a satellite is fully developed. Then, the private sector enters and offers to buy the technology and makes money through selling its services, such as the images that are transmitted from a remote sensing satellite. This data is valuable to many organizations. We have many such examples in Iran, for example in the aviation industry.
But where does all the excitement take place? The main launch site of the Iranian Space Agency is Emamshahr. Then there's the Qom site and Imam Khomeini spaceport in Semnan. As for Iran's first space monitoring center, it was inaugurated in 2013 in Markazi province. Then there are 5 satellite feed stations in Mahdasht, Bushehr, Salmas, Chenaran and Qesh. These centers receive over 200 gigabytes of information from 10 satellites in the LEO and GEO latitudes. Iran's space organization devised 2 10-year programs. Apparently 20 years is the measure for satellite fulfillment. The first 10-year program ended a couple of years ago. Its goal, which it achieved, was space technology advancement and achieving a production cycle. The second 10-year plan is to extend Iran's space economy domestically and externally. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. And do tune in again at the same times next week, because you never know what's going to be on. And take a look at our social pages to leave your comments and topic requests. Bye for now.